Hello, this is John Haverkamp. I wanted to do a real quick demo on polypainting because we didn't get to it in the first installment of the ZBrush How to Sculpt a Dragon class. So the key to good polypainting is a good detail pass. And let me pop this display material off, and you can see that I already have some polypaint info on this character's, who I'm calling Spike, by the way. Let me turn off the body. It's on a separate subtool, so we can just check the head out. So I've got some pretty detail, scale, wrinkle type data going on there, and I've given him a once over with the poly paint. But this is, of course, is saved, so what I'm going to do is just throw away this polypaint info and show you what I did and see if I can do a better job. Alright, so first thing to do is go up here to color, and let's lay down a darker base layer. That's how I like to start, and for something like a dragon that has a lot of scaly crevasses and things, a darker color to build up from is really the way to go. So do I want to go with a brown, or maybe even a dark purple or a dark blue? Either would be the case. I would not go with 100% black. It's just going to be too much, and I would really like some other color information. And I'm going to pick that color choice based on what the sort of overall tone is going to be. So this guy ends up being pretty brown overall, so I started with a dark brown. But maybe I'm going to try something else. Maybe go a little bit greener, bluer maybe. So maybe a dark off green, tertiary green. So let's to use my fill, what I want to do is I want to fill the object, but I need to turn on RGB, and since I want to completely replace the color information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this RGB intensity up to 100%, and then I'm going to fill the object. And it looks like I have a mask going on there, so let me clear the mask before I do that. There we go. Alright. Ah, the mask is still there. Masking. Clear the mask. And one more time. Alrighty there. So, sort of this dark green base layer, and I think the eyes might be a little distracting. I'll probably turn them back on later, but for the moment I'm going to go into solo mode so I don't have to think about the other objects. And to just get started here, I'm going to open up my masking palette, and I'm going to do a mask by cavity real quick. Okay. Now you can't really see that since it's so dark, but maybe if I zoom in you can see that these creviced areas are deeper, and that's the mask. If I turn that off, we're not going to see that. So what I'm going to do is do one more. I'm going to do a blur mask, and that's going to fade that mask out, and I'm going to switch to a lighter color, and maybe a yellow, a greenish yellow, and I'm going to go on to spray, maybe color spray. The difference between spray and color spray is that color spray adds a sort of random assortment of other colors related to the one that you picked, whereas the normal spray just sprays 100% with the one you have. So I'm going to go ahead with the color spray since this is a base layer. This is not the final. And I'm going to pick an alpha. Remember, this is sprayed, so maybe this one or this one. So it's alpha 7 or 8 are my options at the moment. And I'm going to turn up the brush size pretty good. And this is going to be very subtle because of that mask and then blur masks that I did. But I'm going to start laying this down. And I had my Z add on too, so I need to back out of that, turn that off. I just want to paint. And I do not have symmetry on, and I think that's a good idea. And you can see I'm just sort of knocking some of this down. And the other thing you can do is, once you've got the mask, you can turn off this view mask, so that you actually, the mask is still there, but you can actually see what you're actually getting 100%. So let's lie this down. This is pretty darn green, but maybe I will go with a more green flavor for this guy. So, whoops. I could speed this up by turning on symmetry, but you know what, I don't think I'm going to. And I'm just hitting the top surfaces right now. Following the contours of my sculpt, and I'm going to stay away with painting the undersides of things. I'm trying to think of this as a directional airbrush that is going to leave me pretty dark. I'm going to turn the draw size down again so that I can hit this upper edge of this bottom jaw without touching the underside. And of course I'm probably going to paint the inside of the mouth a different color eventually. And let's go back up. So my kind of thinking is that I want the poly paint to complement the sculpt. When you poly paint, you don't want to think, sort of painting sculpture, you don't want to think in terms of I'm painting the color of the actual object. It's still a falsification. It's still art. So there are some tricks you can use. Number one is you paint the upper areas lighter than you paint the underside areas. You know, that's reflecting that light comes from the sky in our world, right? So the shadows tend to be underneath things. So that will sort of accentuate that sort of artsy that effect that we're used to. And the other thing is that in color theory, warmer colors come to the front, whereas cooler colors, so I switched to an orange here, and I'm going to hit these very prominent brow ridges that I got. So I hit all the upper areas with light, and now I'm hitting these extreme upper areas with a warmer color. And whoops, just a little glitch there. I got to redraw my guy, and let's bring him back. Yeah, sorry about that. And I lost track of what I was saying too, which is that warmer colors come forward and cooler colors recede. So if I pick a cooler color and start to fill my crevices, I'm doing one side then the other, that will make things pop. Remember, this is a base layer. This is by no means the final. Not by a long shot. I'm just sort of getting some layers down. That's getting really dark underneath there. And we'll switch to another material to paint it. Let's see what we get with this trim. Do we get a little bit more definition? Of course, we could always put it on flat color, in which case you get no shader information and you're seeing exactly the color information that you're painting. But I don't like to paint in that. I like to, yeah, let's go with this one for a little while. So let's try something warm, but maybe not quite as much. And for the sake of speed on this base layer, I'm going to turn symmetry on for a second, and I'm going to hit those higher areas. And get that upper prominence. And I'm staying away from the horns right at the moment because I got some other stuff planned with them. And so you see, if you get those warms next to the cools, you start to set your character off. Alright. Hit all these horns, I think, with a more of a red type of color. And I'm just going to lay a base coat down. And you know what? For these, I'm going to switch the alpha because I'm not liking that mottled. I'm going to switch to alpha 58, which is kind of a directional line with, when it's on the spray, it'll kind of give a crosshatch type of feeling. Some reds into this. And probably at some point I'll do several partial fills with various maskings set up, which will unify the color scheme and bring it towards a more predominantly one color. But I like to get these distinct variations going first. Okay, so I'm breaking my rule here about painting the underside of those, not letting the light get so into the underside. So let me switch to a deeper color. And I'll hit the underside of these horns with that deeper color. And let's do that right there. Just the undersides. I feel like this material is maybe a little too dark for y'all to see it, so I'm going to switch to flat color for a moment so y'all can see better. Maybe a little bit darker. Coming from the underside here. I could turn on backface masking so I don't, and use a bigger brush, and that'll help it not bleed over to the forward side of these. And maybe do the same and get a little bit lighter going on. Well, I totally forgot his forward horn, so let me get that deeper color first. And then a lighter color for the forward part of it. And well, I think I want to try getting some darker, more intense colors for the end. And I think I'm going to switch off this color spray and maybe just go freehand with, let me think of a good alpha here. Let me just try this sort of brush shaped one. See how it works. If I don't like it, I'll turn it off. And so I just want to get those tips. Ooh, that's too intense. So I can do two things with that. I could turn the color down, or I could turn the RGB intensity down. Remember, this isn't a spray now. So I think I'm just going to turn the RGB intensity down and sort of sneak up on it. And I still got back face masking on, so it shouldn't be going to the other side. Maybe I don't want that though. I want to get those tips really red. And maybe I'll use this Alpha 58 without the spray and see how that treats me. I'll get some lines. See that alpha in action right there. Give me some nice directional lines with those. There we go. Okay, now let's see what it looks like in a material. Yeah, so this material has a lot of reflectivity and cavity detection and everything, but you can see even it's picking up the polypainting info. Let me even try maybe my rich bronze, and you can see where that's headed. So yeah, that's a base layer of polypainting. Kind of sets me up to do maybe a couple more things. Remember, I still have that mask going, so I'm going to clear this mask. And let's think about maybe a peak and valley mask, which might take a second. Let it go ahead and calculate that. And ooh, I kind of like that. Now that's masking these more of these sort of crevice areas. And so what I'm going to do is I'm liking that dark. So I'm going to inverse the mask and maybe grow it once. Oops, other way around. I needed to grow that before the inverse. So there's the mask. Grow it once to expand those, and now blur them. And now inverse it. Oh, didn't take it. There we go. So let's think about what if I got a dark purple. I'm just going to try this. It's not black, it's a dark purple I'm trying to pick here. and I'm on an RGB intensity of 30. I'm going to go ahead and turn my mask off. Not turn my mask off, but turn the view of the mask off, and go to color and fill the object. It's going to fill it 30%. So we're going to see if I like the direction that goes. No, I don't actually. It looks kind of dull. So I'm going to back out of that, and maybe I'm going to try something lighter and see what that does. Ooh, that's interesting, but too much. Let's try a duller, less saturated purple and see what that does. Kind of goes in army green direction, doesn't it? Let's try it in a different material. Let's go back to the flat color and see what we get with that. See if I actually like it, or whether it's just interacting with the material. I don't think I like it. What would a yellow look like? Sort of a tertiary yellow. I don't like that either. I think I blurred it too much. So let's clear my mask. Let's go back to those peaks and valleys, maybe with a little bit more range, so I don't have to blur it quite so much. And it's thinking about it. Sorry for the radio silence here. I'm just waiting for the system process. There we go. That's interesting. So I'm going to inverse this and turn that intensity down. Turn off the view mask. Let's toggle that and see if I like it. No, you know what? I don't think I like the inverse. You just gotta kind of play with things. Let's see what that does. Oh, that's getting the underside, isn't it? I think I might have to hand paint this to my liking rather than doing a fill. So I want this tertiary. So what I'm doing now, so I've got that mask. I did not go with the inversion of it, and I'm hitting the high areas, and I don't like this alpha. Let's back out of that. Maybe back to a spray. And back to a color spray. This kind of mottled sponge type texture. Let's go really big with this since we got this interesting mask going on. See if we can get some splotchy variation. Maybe actually turn symmetry off. Let's go grayer. There we go. Let's get in some other information in there. We'll go a little bit lighter, maybe more towards green. these darker areas, I think this will finally start doing what I want it to do, which is pull in some more data. This can look a little machined. I'm going to clear the mask. Let's look at it in a variation of materials. I think that looks pretty interesting. I like what's going on there. But now it's time to take that information and make it respond to the sculpture. So I've got no mask now, and I've got my green color. It's still on the spray, so I'm going to go back to freehand. And I'm going to sort of pick individual scales that are going to get that lightest of the light treatment. And if I pick a scale that's surrounded by darker colors, it'll make it pop more. So my thinking here is think about establishing some directionality to these lighter areas that will lead the eye to follow the form. I want this sort of swoop here to be paid attention to, if that makes sense. This is sort of like dabbing it with a sponge. And I definitely want to try to bring out some stuff with eyes. And I've got a blue base laid out. Let's go out of solo mode and actually see my eyes. So I think that blue dark base is going to accentuate those eyes. But now I want to pop some attention to detail to the eyelids. So I'm going to pick an orange, and with the same brush, come in close and kind of find these little spikes at the center of the scales that I put in there. And orange being the complementary color, or the opposite of blue. That should really, I don't like this brush suddenly for the moment. I'm going to switch to more smooth, maybe this one. I'll start to get some eye leading information that will go around the eyes. And let me do the same thing for the other side. Just kind of dabbing some orange in this area. And then following around. So let's zoom out and see if you guys can see that. Let's try it with our interesting material. That kind of cancels it out too much. So maybe the rich bronze is really the best sort of presentation one to check out. By the way, how you pick up from the color, how you sort of your eyedropper tool in ZBrush is the key C, the letter C on your keyboard. And so wherever your cursor is hovering over, that's how you'll pick up your color. Now, of course, these gums need to be differentiated from the sort of the scale, and that'll set the teeth up better. The teeth haven't been painted, and they're kind of on a flat material, so that's by no means the final of that either. Let me give you the flat color version of this, which makes it hard to paint, for me to paint, but I think you guys can see it better. And I'm doing this at the top. I don't want to treat it like a coloring book and just, you know, paint hard right down to that edge. That's not what I'm doing. I've got a fairly big brush, and I'm painting almost on that top edge, and so that my natural follow off or focal shift of our brush is going to fade that information down and let me keep that base coat that I've already laid down exposed there. And there's my tongue in there, so maybe we'll go with a lighter upper part of that tongue, and tongues always look best with this type of alpha, I think. Well, maybe I need to put that on spray. Let's see again and get that darker color for the back of the mouth. Set up any poly groups for the inside of this mouth, so this is kind of a pain. But I think I'm getting it good enough. Let's get the underside here. There we go. Let's see how he looks like in our bronze. With those shockingly white teeth, that's a little much for me. So I'm going to pick sort of a more green color and maybe get on my color spray, and just to wrap this up, get on my alpha number 7, turn my intensity down. I kind of want to knock this red back so his gums aren't quite so. Well, I keep having trouble with that. Let me switch back to a basic material. There we go. That red is just a little too much for me. And so I'm just subtly knocking it back. Doing the opposite of what I was doing before, where I painted at the top edge of the gum. Now I'm painting sort of more in that crevice with a very unsaturated dark green. And I'm just sort of taking the saturation shine off. How intense I painted those gums. Started to look like he was wearing lipstick to me, which is not the effect I wanted. And I went back to my red. And now I'm painting. It's almost a brown. I'm going to transfer some of that info into the surrounding skin. So I'm breaking up the contrast here. Now I think my nostrils definitely need some of this type of color too. Maybe it goes more towards a red as it gets around the nostrils. So this deep red will kind of be a base coat, and then maybe almost a pink for these upper areas. Now remember, I got a very low RGB intensity right now, and I'm on color spray. I'm just hitting the top edges of that, trying to accentuate my forms, make my forms come alive with color. Some yellow type information with a little bit more intensity turned up, a little bit bigger of a brush size, and pull some of that modeling into what I've done there, so I get a distinct environment. And I forgot I didn't have symmetry on, so I didn't paint the inside of this dark, and it looks weird, or dark red, so it looks weird, so I gotta do that, make them match up. Tend to this horn a little bit. So back to my Alpha 58, back to freehand. Directionally stroking this. Maybe even much lighter for the sides. And this particular tip. Now I'm coming around with some marks that are 90 degrees to the other ones. Establish some other directionality there. Anyway, that's the theory. More of the same. I'm going to get that blood red tip back with the deep red here, so I want it to match the other horns. But that's the theory, and it would just probably be several more hours of the same to really nail this guy. Whoops, I don't like that. Having too much fun, but I'm going to conclude it here. Thanks so much, and I'll be seeing you. Bye.